Hey everyone, for episode 40 of the Rental Roundtable, we had my friend Chad Wagner from A1 Rented in Minnesota. They're a 4-location group that was started in 1963 from Chad's grandfather. His father ran it as second generation, and Chad purchased the business with his wife in 2016. A few years ago, they went from 1 to 3 locations overnight, 6 employees to 35 employees overnight. Talked about what that M&A process was like. Talked about their 4th location they've added. We talked about peer groups, traction, the entrepreneurial operating system, the things they do to kind of keep everything on track. And lastly, we talked about equipment rental subscription programs. Is that something that the industry is moving towards? And we talked about some of the pros and cons of that. So Chad's a great guy. He really helps the industry a lot. And I had a great time talking to him. So I hope you guys enjoy. All right, everyone. Welcome to the Rental Roundtable. Here with my friend Chad Wagner, the owner of A1 Rented in Minnesota. Chad, thank you for coming on the podcast today.
Hey, it's great to be here. A beautiful snowy morning here in the beautiful Minneapolis area.
I know. I was in Minnesota in January. It was below zero, the coldest I've ever been in my life. Here in Georgia, where it's cold, but rainy. We get rain, not snow here in Georgia. How much snow do you guys have there today?
We've got, 3-4 inches on the ground, which is a little light for us. These past couple of winters haven't been as snowy as I remember growing up as a child, but we're doing all right. At least the ground's white right now. If it's going to be cold, we want the snow. At least we get to get outside and enjoy that a little bit. So we're doing all right today.
Yeah. 3 or 4 inches in Georgia will shut down the city for a week here in Atlanta. So that's for you guys, just nothing. How does that impact your rental business, by the way? Is that good or bad for rental when it starts to snow?
Yeah, it's not great for rental. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
We our revenue looks like a roller coaster throughout the year. So we're pretty strong from April through the end of October, maybe the early November, but really December, January, February are extremely slow months for us. Frozen ground, snow on the ground, below freezing temperatures just really slows everything down.
It's a good time to record a podcast then. Here we are in February, snow on the ground.
Yeah, this is an okay time to do a little extra promo work.
Yeah, for sure. Well, just for everyone, I met Chad 2 years ago at the ARA show, the Future of Rental, which was the first Future of Rental, right? They did another event this year, which was awesome. I ran into you there, Chad. And Chad and I were on a panel together. There's 4 of us talking about the future of rental. And at that time, we talked about subscription. Something we'll talk about later. Is that something that makes sense for this industry? What are the pros and cons of that? So I've known Chad, obviously, for a couple of years. I got to see you again at the Future of Rental show. So I think for this episode in particular, what's interesting is, you didn't start necessarily as a rental owner, right? You were a teacher for 10 years, and then you went to 1 location, that you bought locations, you had 3 locations, and, that M&A sort of experience would be interesting to talk about. One of the things that came up in the Future of Rental with John Durante, as you remember, Chad, was like, how do you grow from 1 location to 2 locations? And they went from 1 to 11, and I believe 2 of those were cold starts, and the other 8 or 9 were acquisitions. So you obviously gone the acquisition route, which would be very interesting for our audience to kind of hear how you think about that. So a lot to talk about today. But I think first, Chad, like what I'd love to do is kind of hear about your background, your story. Like you were a teacher. Tell me about the last 10 or 15 years. How did you go from that to where you are now running a 3-location rental group in Minnesota?
Yeah. So grew up, actually, I'm 3rd generation in the equipment rental business. My grandfather started our single location back in 1963. He had previously worked for John Deere as a safety engineer for about 20 years and became affiliated with some other rental folks in the Moline area where ARA is headquartered and was founded. And so Leonard Hawk became a friend of my grandfather's. And some family circumstances brought them to Minnesota. And so my grandparents hauled a few trailer loads of equipment that Leonard helped my grandfather buy and bring north. And it really was the old mom and pop, everything in the garage rental kind of shop. Then my dad went to college, came back into the business in the late 70s, and my dad ran it as a single location store from the late 70s until I came back into the business in I moved back into the Twin Cities area in about 2006. So I was a teacher at that time. I had done some time in the rental business as a youngster, pushing the broom in the wash bay, cleaning up, general kind of stuff like that. As I got into college, I was on our delivery crew. We did some party and event rental. And so was driving the delivery truck and setting up tents in the summer and so forth. Went on, I was a high school math teacher for a decade. I taught initially in the Clark County School District, which is in Las Vegas, for 3 years, and then moved back here to the Midwest in 2006. Started working for Dad again in the summers when I wasn't teaching. Looked around, and at one point, my wife, who worked in the business as well at the time, said, she'll quote me and say, I'm never going to be in rental. I'm never doing this. I'm never doing what my dad did. And, full circle, here we are, right?
Mm-hmm.
What happened? I was in education. I got my master's degree in teaching, and I kind of got out of that and looked around, and I went, now what? And I wasn't going to be a principal. I wasn't going to be an athletic director. I wasn't going to be in administration in the school. That wasn't my desire. So I looked at rental and looked at my dad's business and what he had and thought maybe rental's what I want to do. And maybe it allows me, to break through a glass ceiling that I felt like I was stuck under in teaching and sort of hold my own road. So I went and talked to my dad about that, and he said, well, there's not room for you right now, son. You got some work to do. So now we created a little business plan. I kind of took over the small event side of our business while I was still teaching. And as I grew that side of the business, that afforded us the opportunity for me to come on full time in 2014. And so 2014, I came in essentially as the transition plan, the manager. Was learning from my dad, working side by side with my dad. And even after that first year, there were too many chefs in the kitchen, too many chiefs on site. And so we began working quickly towards a transition of ownership plan. And so in 2016, my wife and I bought the company from my dad. My wife is a 50-50 owner with me in the company. She has worked in the business. My dad stayed on under a 5-year employment agreement to kind of help the transition. I needed his help at the time, just from a staffing standpoint. And so I was involved with peer groups then, starting in 2016, and continue to do so. But was fortunate enough to get involved with a group of peers who were a lot of multi-site operators. And that started getting my wheels really turning and sort of propelled me to the idea and the confidence that being a multi-site rental operator was what I wanted to do. And so did some prospecting in our local market here and ended up acquiring another company that actually had 2 locations in 2021. So mid-pandemic, we went from a single location of general tool and party rental to a 3-location store with a dedicated event rental location and 2 general tool locations. Our staff went from about 6 full-time staff to about 30 plus overnight via that acquisition. Mm-hmm. Revenue grew drastically. Problems and challenges also grew drastically. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So since 2021, we've continued to kind of align our brands around 2 brands, A1 Rent It on the equipment rental side, and then Broadway Tent and Event on the event rental side. And then early 2024, we did acquire another local operator that was general tool and party as well. So we now have a total of 4 locations, 3 that primarily focused on general tool rental, and 1 that's focused on the party and event side. So that's where we stand today as of early 2025.
Awesome. I didn't realize you had another acquisition of 4 locations. That's awesome. Thank you for I have a lot of questions, by the way. It's interesting. So I love that this is a 3rd generation rental company. I've talked to several, but it doesn't always work, right? The 2nd generation gets in, 3rd generation, the reputation is they fall off, right? Like you grew up in it and you've obviously taken it to new heights. You took the 1 location, you've been growing it, etc. So I just think awesome. I just love hearing the story. It's been in your family since 1963, and you're continuing to build this, which has been great. I'm curious, so you weren't there starting the business in 1963, but you hear the stories and you saw your dad, and now you've been running it since 2014. How has the rental industry changed? Because it's really been in your life since you were born, really. How has it changed in the last several decades?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was part of my frustration, maybe, between 2006 and 12 when I was working for my dad in the summer, maybe that 5-6 year span while I was in teaching. Yeah. And just looking at, I would say, the old the old school idea of mom and pop shop, single operator. I watched my dad work, 6, 7 days a week, 50, 60 hours a week.
Mhm.
Um, and was never able to, in his case, wasn't able to grow beyond that. And probably in talking with him, he got to a point where his business had grown to a comfort level and he had just kind of hit the plateau and he
Mhm.
wasn't really looking for growth anymore. It was a mature business in his mind and it was providing what he wanted as far as a lifestyle, what he wanted as far as time away, time at work, relationships, etc. And so I think what's changed in my mind or where my path has taken me is just really progress of the industry, running it like a professional company. All of the acquisition that's happened in this landscape in the last 5 or 6 years, I think is so much around how disjointed the industry was as a whole
Mhm.
with many, many independent operators and not many of those outside of their local markets maybe talking very much. And I think, again, the evolution of peer groups over the last decade. My dad was in a peer group previously, one of the first peer executive groups. And so just I see our industry continuing to evolve, continuing to add technology, also continuing to streamline. I think the industry has gone from the original model, which was, I mean, my grandfather's original slogan. He had a caricature of this sort of mechanic in an apron,
Mhm.
and on the apron said, "This idiot rents anything, almost." You know, I mean, that was
Yeah.
just the mentality was that garage. We've got it all. You can come here. We'll
Yeah.
take care of everything for you. We'll provide you the advice and every tool you could possibly imagine. Where I think the industry now is more specialized, and we see
Mm.
certain cat classes that continue to thrive in rental, but we also
Mm.
see certain items. I would say, many items that have become commoditized. Items that
Mm.
are below $1,000 purchase price that
Mhm.
contractors just buy now. Homeowners just
Mm.
go. The dynamics of that are just different. I think in the small tool market. So I think that's some of the change that I've seen.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like it's such an amazing industry that, it started off with a lot of wheeling and dealing. Like I'll rent anything. I've visited some rental companies and they got the nice fancy equipment, but you go inside, they're renting, popcorn things, and cotton candy and bounce houses. And it's like you could buy random things off the shelf and it's like anything you want will sell sort of thing. And I love that spirit. It's very entrepreneurial uh spirit in the industry. At the same time, what I've seen, it seems to me there's like a transition happening where we're sort of all growing up together. There's like a sophistication that's happening, right? And it's peer groups is driving this, right? How do we actually work on the business, not in the business every day? Let's launch EOS, right, and get some business, traction and entrepreneurial operating system and some frameworks for the cycles of your business. And then obviously from a technology perspective, right? There's great technology groups out there. And I think there's more coming. There's more people coming into the space going, hey, let's take this up a level. I think it all real started in my mind, probably in the 90s with United, with the platform they built. And they really brought in a lot of sophistication and money and, hey, we're going to make big bets and move the industry forward. I think ultimately the independence, I think it's actually generally been good for the independence because it has forced everyone to kind of move up a level. Which it feels to me in 2025, we're sort of at this precipice of like still honoring the wheeling and dealing, like entrepreneurial hustle, which it should never go away. With also like, how do we build a sophisticated organization that can grow the business, right? And I think in my mind, I don't know if you would agree with this, it sort of seems like we're sort of straddling both worlds where we're not all United Rentals or should be. We're also still not renting stuff out of our van, right? But it's sort of it's combining both of those into this new future in the next 5 years. Do you feel like that transition is starting to happen right now?
Yeah, definitely. And I would agree. I think the part of what part of what I love about this industry, and part of what drew me in was the people in this industry. There's just that hustle side, that
Mm-hmm.
blue collar side, that hard work side that comes with the rental industry, and I have never met anyone in rental who doesn't have that as part of their fabric. But on the other side, I think to your point, what we're doing, I mean, we're on EOS, we're running traction. I think it has helped us immensely as we are going through the acquisition process. We now
Yeah.
know, like we onboard a new acquisition target. We onboard them. We know exactly who we are. We know
Mm-hmm.
exactly how to explain who we are and what's important. And then I think for like our leadership team and our managers and so forth, the industry is now about creating those guidelines or those guardrails for them.
Yeah.
Let them still do the hustle. Let them still be in the game. Let them still wheel and deal a little bit, but provide them with guardrails that, protect our equipment, protect our liabilities, the really super important things, but allow them to foster those relationships. Because the wheel and dealing and the hustle,
Mm-hmm.
that's where the customer relationships are
Mm-hmm.
really built. And we are, at the end of the day, we're a service industry, and those
Mm-hmm.
always comes back to those relationships. It's not about the products. The products
Yeah.
that 99% of us carry are a commodity now. You can go down the street, you can find that same product from a different we are a service industry, and customer relationships have to be number one.
Totally agree. And I think that's the role of technology or AI is not to like replace people's jobs at all. It is to enable rental operators and owners to spend as much time as possible with the customer, right? To do what actually makes you different. And I posted, we had a State of the Union report we just came out with. We'll post it publicly this week, but we interviewed over 50 rental companies, some other specialists. And what we found was on average, the average rental company is using 3 to 4 separate technology systems, right? It's like a website and accounting and a software and a GPS, and none of them talk to each other. And someone, one of the, a rental owner commented on my post this morning and said, totally spot on. The purpose of technology needs to be for us to be able to serve our customers better and faster. And I was like, that's it, right? So I think about the future. I think it's a connected future, right? Where it feels like magic and everything just works. You're not spending time reconciling, point of sale transaction and the online order and where the GPS is and all these 15 different things that don't talk to each other. Like, I think part of where the industry is going is like all that just works and you're not worried about all the systems and stuff. You're worried about how do I go out in the field to talk to more customers, right? And I've talked to other customers of like they're launching software for the first time, right? There's a big jump from nothing, pen and paper to software. And I asked him, and he's like, and one of the guys in Minnesota were launching, and I asked him, he was like, I'm gonna have all this time all of a sudden, and I was like, well, what are you gonna do? And he was like, I can finally go talk to my customers. I can go bring donuts to the job sites. I can go out in the field. And like, that is what makes great rental companies great is when you could spend much time with customers on the, delivering an amazing customer experience, right? That's the difference between the nationals, I think. And I think people are moving in that direction, which is exciting to see.
Yeah, I think you see the successful independent rental stores
Yeah.
and companies really excelling in that area, right? And also being highly focused. I think understanding who they are and who their market is and who their target customer is and what their target product lines are. More and more targeted approach to that rather than the we're everything to everyone or we're going to show up. We can't be, as independents, the majority of us can't be the Uniteds. We can't come and give the entire shop, offer the entire grocery store and say, just bring your shopping cart, we'll bring it right to you, right? But what we can provide is we can provide and improve customer experience simply by knowing who they are, know who their kids are, know what it takes for them as a contractor or subcontractor or a homeowner even to make their day go better, right? What smooths it out, right? Like you're just talking about how having technology talks. Like we've really got to understand as rental stores, like what our customer needs and what makes their day better. And the more we can be out in the field, the more technology helps us improve all the stuff that's going on in the background with uptime and equipment availability and pricing and logging it in your accounting system, all that kind of stuff. Then we have more time available and our staff have more time available to do that.
For sure, especially with labor shortages. And I think like ideally, if we flash forward to the future of rental, it's where I met you. I've seen you twice now, right? Like, I think it should be invisible. Like, we're recording this podcast. It's cold outside and rainy. What I'm not thinking about, which I'm thinking about now, is the heat that's on and it's comfortable. You know what I mean? Like, that's what technology is. It should be invisible. It should be comfortable, and you should be able to do the things you want to do. Like, if it's working well, you should never even be thinking about it, right? That to me is like, that's the magic where we as an industry need to move forward. And I think people are wanting that, I really get that feeling. I do have a question on the focus side, right? Because I talked to a lot of groups who are just equipment rental, and I talked to some groups who we don't work with, but are event rental. And there are some that do both, like you do. How do you think about the balance of doing equipment and event rental, also in the spirit of focus? How have you guys been able to pull that off?
Well, one, I think I'm nuts.
Maybe.
It's to be honest, Kyle, I feel like the similarities between equipment rental and event rental stop with the word rental.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
I look at it's like right brain, left brain, man.
Mm-hmm.
And there's days when I question like why. And on my team, I'm probably the one that's most, and I won't say only impacted, but most impacted by the fact that we operate in both spaces. Um, and I have to flip the switch back and forth, and it's not always easy. Um, and I think the biggest difference um, is the sales cycle. On equipment rental, your sales cycle is less than 7 days in most cases, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of times less than 48 hours.
Mm-hmm.
That's your sales cycle. From the time you get the initial contact from the customer and what their equipment needs are to the time that they're picking up or you're delivering that piece of equipment, very short sales cycle, right? Where the event cycle um, is much longer. I mean, it's 60 to 120 days in a lot of cases. And to me, the difference is on the equipment side, you usually have a chance to fix it if you screw it up. If you're prompt and responsive, you can usually fix it and you can usually keep the customer and keep the customer happy. Piece of equipment goes down. If you're responsive, send a tech out, send a new piece of equipment out, swap it out, whatever. If you're prompt and responsive, you can probably save that. Not only save the relationship, but probably even save your revenue in most cases, right?
Mm-hmm.
On the event rental side, you have this long sales cycle. You've got all this opportunity to prep, look at every little detail, and then you got one shot to execute. And you have to get it right. Because in most cases on the event side, there is no time for a do-over. There's no time to swap a piece of equipment out. There's no time to fix it, right? And if it goes sideways, you're probably not going to be able to save the relationship completely. I mean, maybe you can, but it's tough. It's a lot different. And two, you're probably not going to be able to save all your revenue. You're probably going to be given some revenue back because something didn't work right or they didn't get to have this part of the experience or whatever. So doing the two sides it's tough, man. And it's two different ball games. Super thankful. We do have a great leadership team. Includes all of our branch managers, office manager, and I think they truly understand as well the hardships that go on each side of the business in each segment. But they're not living it in their branch day in, day out through segments where I feel like I'm forced to.
Yeah, I would not want to mess with an unhappy bride who didn't get the right event rental stuff at a wedding. That's a different level of stress than a contractor who needs a different piece of equipment broke down on a job site. The groups I talk to, I feel like they maybe start with both, but inevitably they start moving more towards equipment rental. Like, do you see event rental part of your strategy long term? And I guess why, right? Because it is like, it's longer sales cycle. It's a higher bar. You get one shot. You may be losing money on these deals, right? Why do you keep doing it?
It's a rush, man. It's an adrenaline.
Yeah. You like it. It sounds like you like
I
it.
like it.
Yeah.
I love the relationship side of it. You think you've got a
Yeah.
strong relationship with an equipment rental guy, contractor, homeowner,
Mm-hmm.
right? Man, you can build a lifelong relationship based off of a single event.
Mm-hmm.
And you're there in the trench helping these event rental folks um, with some of their biggest experiences of their lives. It might be their wedding, might be an anniversary, might be a graduation party, might be a company that's celebrating, 50 years in business, and they've got their employees and their clients in there. So you're always celebrating these big milestones for
Yeah.
these folks, and so it's about the rush. And that's never going to go away. People aren't going to stop celebrating. They're gonna find ways to celebrate those milestones. It's what brings hope and excitement to us as humans at a very human level. And so that's the part that I love about it. I would say the greatest challenge has been over the last 3-4 years since COVID has been the labor and the pricing issue and how to make the margins work. And knowing what those margins are as labor costs go up and as equipment costs go up too, but just being able to execute and navigate the expectations and being able to deliver on those has been a challenge. But again, I like both. Recently, I've been talking to some general contractor, construction firms about our event rental side for things
Mm,
like breaking or when they need temporary structures for long-term remodel projects, things like that.
mm.
And I think we're uniquely positioned because we do also have some of those relationships already on the equipment side. And so now we're saying, hey, can we take some of these and bridge them over to our event rental side? And
Yeah,
we've had talked to a couple of people along the way who said, oh, well, I didn't even realize that you did that or that you could provide that
yeah.
for us as well. That's awesome. We like working with you already. So I think there is an opportunity to bridge it over, but I'll go back to it. It's the rush, man. It's tough to
Yeah,
get over.
it's fun. I mean, like, we're talking about what happens when it goes wrong, but like when it goes right, these are people's like iconic moments. It's weddings, it's bar mitzvahs. It's really important events for people's lives. And if you do a great job, you're serving them in these highlight moments, right? And I imagine the high and the rush, it's awesome, right? And you talk about serving your community, like since 1963 and building lifelong relationships, right? Like you serve your community in Minnesota, and that's through equipment, but also event rental. And yeah, maybe it's a little bit more stressful, et cetera. But like, I don't know, having a purpose that you're actually making a difference in your local community, I think is very important. I think you feel that too. I want to ask about the multi-location stuff, right? So you joined a peer group, it sounds like, and obviously I ran into you 2 weeks ago at Dan Crowley's peer executive event. Thank you, Dan, for picking up the tab if you're listening.
Appreciate that, Dan.
And yeah, thanks, Dan. So I'm curious, like when you joined the peer group, you said you were a one location group and you joined a group of mostly multi-location groups. Was that because you saw yourself becoming a multi-location group and you wanted to be around those types of people, or is it just happenstance? And did that actually end up influencing your decision to go multi-location?
Yeah. So the group that I'm part of, Platinum Group, started with about five members. It was a new startup group that Dan started, and so
And what,
it,
what year is this? Did you join, by the way?
this is 2016.
Okay, 2016. So you're two
Yes.
years in.
Yep, 2016. 2 years into the business, had just transitioned into ownership. Had taken over ownership from my dad, and my dad was a big encourager. He said, you really, he's like, I gleaned so much information over the years. Um, he said, I really encourage you to get involved. And so I had my name on a list an interest list with Crowley, and I had tried one other group, and yeah, I don't know if this is the right fit for me. And he
Mm.
said, okay, I'll keep you in mind. And then this group started to form again. He was maintaining a list of interested operators, and so he just brought it together and started out as a group of five. Robert Pedersen, the current ARA president, is a member of that group and was
Oh,
there
cool.
at that original meeting in Missoula, Montana. And so the group just kind of formed. We added members over the course of the next year or two, got up to 10 members. As we added members, it just kind of became this group of multi-site guys
Mm.
in the group. And I felt like I was the fly on the wall. I mean, Crowley does his composite book and sends out his financials to his group, and I'm
Mhm.
like, I'm not even close. I'm like, these guys haven't kicked me out yet. I guess I'll just keep showing up.
Yeah, when are they going to realize? Look around. Who's this small guy in the room? Like, how did he get in here?
Right. Like, what am I doing here? What do I bring to these guys? Right. That's part
Yeah.
of the idea of peer groups is like, everybody's bringing stuff.
Mhm.
And I kind of hung around and I started to, I had a great opportunity to listen to these guys at, 2 meetings a year and got some encouragement from them and was able to really build my knowledge base where I felt like, I think maybe I can go that route, the multi-site route. And so, I brought my acquisition targets to my group and members in my group and had conversations with them and said, hey, here's what I'm looking at. What do you think? And I got some really honest, candid feedback from some guys who've been in the industry a long time. Alex DeBose with Rental Guys in Chico, California, is in our group too, and he's one who certainly served as a mentor to me along this path, and I'm super thankful for. But yeah, it was happenstance, honestly, Kyle,
Mm.
and it just along the way turned into the multi-site group, and they let me hang around long enough to become a multi-site guy myself, and here we are.
Well, I like the phrase, show me your friends, I'll show you where you'll be in 5 years. I don't know if this is subconscious or conscious, but like when you surround yourself with sophisticated operators who are bigger than you, inevitably, right? If you stick around long enough, they're going to pull you forward. And so I don't know if you intentionally thought about that, but what you did think about was like, hey, I want to be the best version of myself, right? Let me surround myself with the best people I can find. And I think that's the power of the peer group. And I talk about this almost every other episode. I'm not a paid sponsor for a peer executive group or Crowley or anything. I just love it. And I guess would you say that would your company be in the same position it is now if it wasn't for the peer group? Which is now what I guess nine years in for you.
Yeah. No, I confidently say no.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be here because it was, you don't know what you don't know
Yeah.
for a while. It just, again, being a part of that group initially and being able to learn and soak up, I bring my notebook with and I'm just sitting
Uh-huh.
there writing and writing and writing notes. And I come home and I, reread it and check in and make some little changes and move some things forward and certainly help move the needle on our single location we were there. But really that's what gave me the confidence to sort of stick my neck out there and say, okay, we're going to go from one site to 3 sites overnight and figure it out. Right.
Yeah. So what was that process like? You had 6 employees, and then you wake up tomorrow and you got 35, and your revenue roughly whatever tripled, or you went from 1 to 3 locations.
Yeah.
You've done your homework, you brought it to the peer group, they've kind of pushed on stuff, and you probably didn't think about certain things, and they pointed things out. At the end of the day, you go, okay, it's my decision, I'm going to move forward. What does that first morning look like? You wake up and you have 35 employees and you had 6 the day before. Like, what's going through your head?
Well, the reality is it's the first week of June. So the first week of June in Minnesota means it's high school grad party season. So it's the busiest 2 weeks of our entire
It's a
year.
good time to buy a company then, right? Right
Yeah.
in the
The
busiest part of the
timing
year.
was the timing was supposed to be about a month earlier, and that didn't come to fruition. And so it's the first week of June. My wife works in our business. It's our busiest week. And so she needs to be in the store. So I grab my daughter, who at that time is about 10 years old. I say, honey, we gotta be in the truck tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. and we got to go to this new location that we bought because we've got to get the credit card set up, and I got to be on a call and get them remote access so that our software company can switch the bank accounts over, and I got to bring the cash drawers over, and so that was the reality. Day one was making sure that we could process transactions, we had money in the drawer, and we could be open for business again that day.
Mm.
And then from there, it was just, kind of going through the checklist of, the company we acquired was on a different software platform than we were. So we were running 2 software platforms, a software platform that I knew nothing about,
Mm-hmm.
had no familiarity with. I was just relying on the staff. We retained all of the staff during that acquisition. And we just started going through like, what does it look like going forward? So it was things from, when are we going to change the branding and the name to align? What about apparel? What about uniforms? What are we doing process wise? How are we handling our back end accounting, and who's going to do it, and who's handling the AR and the AP? And now we've got these. I mean, it was just all you could do was just go through and start checking off things and reading that list and saying what needs to rise to the top and working through it. And that fall was when we started EOS and Traction. So that November was our first meeting. So November of 2021, brought in myself and the branch managers, used a EOS implementer, and that was transformational. Not the first meeting, but the next 2-year journey of being on EOS and getting that started. And that's the second piece of the puzzle. I mean, peer
Yeah.
group, I think
Mm-hmm.
is piece number one, but EOS and Traction, we wouldn't have been able to pull together different brands, different philosophies, different personalities, and align them all on the same path without EOS. It would have been a gong show.
Yeah, so talk to me about that. We talked about that with, I think, episode 8 with Jeff Lugnagaris at Northside Tool Rental. They use Traction. It's come up a few times, but if someone's listening and doesn't know what EOS, Traction, what is that, and why is that important for a rental company to be thinking about?
Yeah. So I think for us, first thing it did for us is it caused us to start to talk to each other and learn about each other as people, both professionally and personally on our leadership team. It forces that conversation, which naturally in your day of work, you may or may not be forced to have conversation, especially when you're at different sites, right?
Mm-hmm.
It forced us to come together, learn more about each other, spend some time together. And then the next piece is it creates alignment and philosophy, right? We're going to have our core focus, our core values, our core target, which just say this is who we are. And this is how we're philosophically going to approach our day, why we're here. And then it goes down to another level of detail, which is saying, hey, how do we score ourselves? How do we check in with ourselves and say, hey, are we doing a good job or not? And are we moving the needle or not? And that's that quarterly cadence and having scorecard and rock metrics whereby you're able to see and show to your staff. For me as an owner, be able to show to my staff and say, hey, look at look at what we're accomplishing. Look at how much we've improved the process over the course of the last year and a half. This was a problem. We chose to address it. We did improve it. And now, to your point, it's like technology, just it's working in the background and we don't
Mm-hmm.
think about it anymore. And so if you incrementally take, you know, a little step at a time, um, I recently read something that says, people often overestimate what they can accomplish in 1 year and grossly underestimate what they can accomplish in 10. And I
Mm-hmm.
think EOS really helps with that, which is it just keeps you on this steady. I'm a math guy, right? Background in math, exponential growth, 1%, 1%, keep
Yep.
adding 1%, keep adding 1%, right? Versus a linear mindset where, 1%, 1%, 1% doesn't give you 3%. You've got 3% plus some extra juice because you're adding on to those previous 1%. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's I think that's the power of EOS. It's that sort of that exponential portion and it adds capacity.
Yeah, I think about that every day. That saying you talked about, and I don't think the human brain does a really good job of understanding exponential growth and compounding growth. Like it's hard to like concept. You're a math guy. I'm a math guy myself. Like I see the numbers, and you like what did Einstein say? Like compounding interest is the most powerful force in the universe, sort of thing. Like it's that, but it's not just compounding interest. It's like compounding growth and focus and consistency. And there's no shortcuts. Just keep doing the same thing over and over. I think traction also, it's like, it's like an operating system or cadence to a very chaotic, otherwise chaotic thing, right? Every day you're getting calls within 48 hours. I need this, equipment breaks down, someone quits. You're just constantly hair on fire and you're adding locations. You know, what traction does is like breaks everything into a framework and in a system, right? That makes sense. There's a rhythm throughout the year, right? And we use it for ourselves as well. And I find it so powerful because otherwise you go crazy chasing your tail, right? It's that operating system is ultimately what it is.
Yeah, and you're 100% right. It's the accountability chart builds in, the roles and responsibilities throughout your company, right?
Yep.
Um, if I was if I was leading with the iron fist and everybody had to report to me, I'd be answering, 100 questions a day because everybody's going to have
Yeah.
three questions and we got
Yeah.
30 some people in our organization, right? I
Mm-hmm.
would have zero capacity to do anything else. And same thing for my branch managers. We roll out now. We've rolled out our next level L10s. So our branch managers are now hosting weekly L10s with their key employees at their branches. Again, it's about communication. It's about being on the same page. It's about having these sort of, I call it like a conduit of communication, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it'll get to me if it needs to, but if the branch manager can handle it, we're good, right? But if some employee has a grand idea or a grand frustration, they can cascade it and know that it will come and get to me within the next week because we're going to have a L10 meeting. So I think that piece of EOS and traction just frees the right people up to do the right things that they're ideally suited for. And that, again, creates this momentum, this exponential growth, this exponential capacity around the right people doing the right things on a day in, day out basis and removing the excess clutter and distraction.
Yeah. It's about focus. what Jim Collins would say, right people on the bus, right seats on the bus, and also seeing the momentum, like, oh, we hit our numbers, and then you set a little bit higher numbers, and you just sort of this momentum through the cycle, it just runs itself. And people have told me I'm in a peer group myself, but like the idea for the owner, the CEO is to build the organization builds the company. And this is one tool to help you build the organization because you can't answer every phone call. And if you do, I mean, you're going to go crazy. Also, you're not running a 4-location group, right? So I'm happy to hear you guys are using Traction. I want to talk about subscription programs. It's something that we talked about at the Future of Rental panel 2 years ago. And is that something that the industry is moving towards? Yeah, you pay a monthly subscription and then you get access to a certain amount of rentals or unlimited rentals. I haven't seen like a ton of movement on that yet, although I still think it may happen. I know you were more cutting edge on that. Like, what is your view of subscription and how that can be part of rental moving forward?
Yeah. So in my mind, again, coming from the general tool rental space, I think there's been, we've got a number of tools. So we call them our high five categories. Okay. Things like aerial, earth moving, trailers, right? Those are our high five categories. They're going to produce the majority of our revenue, probably 75% of our revenue. But we have all these other classes of stuff, which is, pumps and plumbing, generators, demolition tools, things like that, like a homeowner would use, but they're not going to need it on a real regular basis. But how do we create like a subscription model around sort of a tool library concept, like that guy in the neighborhood that used to exist in the neighborhood that owned everything, and you'd walk down the street and you'd say, "Hey, Bob, can I borrow this from you?" And you
Yeah,
borrow it, and you bring Bob back a $10 gift card, or you bring him a
yeah,
beer, whatever, and you say, "Thanks, Bob," right?
yeah, right.
But that kind of stuff, I don't think it'll prove out with the larger stuff. I think the Nationals have even tried it along the way, sort of a subscription-based model. You pay a base fee and you get X number of items on an exchange basis on a monthly, I don't think that's where the application is. But I do believe the regular American consumer now has become uh, okay with, normalized the subscription model.
Hmm.
And the idea that you can create potential customer loyalty through a low cost subscription model that would give them access to these maybe smaller hand tools that are less active in your rental
Hmm.
inventory, not really your big draw and your big revenue driver,
Hmm.
but it creates that loyalty, and maybe you put a discount along with it on the larger stuff for their loyalty, right? The other
Yeah,
thing it does for us here in Minnesota, you can create some kind of a subscription model. It really would change some things for our cash flow, I
for
think.
sure. Right.
It would help our off-season cash flow. And those are really the two concepts or the two ideas that are in my head around a subscription model. And, I think it's about loyalty. I think it's about providing value. And then this small stream of revenue income that becomes consistent throughout the year.
I think there's something there that will, is majority of equipment rental going to be on subscription at some point in the future? No, I don't think so. But like, is there a small tool for a certain subset of the customer base that it makes sense? Like, I think that's happening. And I think, people are used to subscribing. I'm subscribing for things I don't even realize. Like, I've got a Costco membership. They just charge me. I'm like, oh yeah, I guess that's a subscription, an annual subscription, right? And then all the Netflix and everything is a subscription now, right? I think people are used to that. And obviously with rental penetration at 60% or so in the US and in parts of the UK and Asia, it's 85%. I think the attitude of ownership in America, which has always been sort of an American ideal, I think that's also changing, right? As the economy is changing as things go for better or worse. And I think people are becoming more comfortable with not having to own things. So once you're open to renting, well, then you also become open to subscription as well. So I hear some groups testing it and piloting it. I think under the right circumstances, it's just another tool for a rental company to have. And, I think over the next few years, we'll start to see more rental companies offering some sort of subscription program.
Yeah, and I'd agree with you too. I think it seems that there is less desire from younger generation to own, and certainly to
Yeah,
own everything. Again, my example of, your neighbor Bob down the street who had everything and you just go to him, right? I think there's a lot less of that now, but there is an appetite for wanting to have access to those items still. And you have, where do I go and what do I do? And again, if you have a subscription to Costco, um, are you going to go to Costco or are you going to go to Sam's Club? Well, you're probably going to go to
exactly.
Costco because you have already paid for the subscription So
The
I
sunk
think
cost fallacy.
yeah, and with our multi-site model and geographically how our stores are located currently and where we're looking to continue to grow, I think we've got again an added impact there where we can be close to a significant number of people in a specific geographic area, which again I think brings some additional value to the subscription. They don't just have to go to the one location. They've got options to go to different locations. And maybe if they're working at their friend's house, or maybe if they're going to help their parents with a project, or their parents are coming to their house, right? Like they've got an option to go to different sites. It's not just at their neighborhood rental store that's close to their home.
Yeah, like I subscribe to the A1 Rent It monthly subscription, and I get, because of that, I can rent things within 24 hours notice. I get a flat 10% discount. I also have a loyalty points for every dollar I spend gets me, whatever, a gift card. And like something like that could be really interesting. And that buys loyalty and drives, stronger customer retention, right?
Right. Expedited checkout, for example, right?
Yeah.
Like you just show up at the yard, you literally just take your phone, you go right and find a yard guy. He scans your code. He says, "Yep, you're right over here." No driver's license check in, no coming into the counter waiting in line, no payment, no out of your vehicle, back into your vehicle. Literally just boom, boom, you're through and you're out. We've already verified you. We know who you are. It's already paid. You're good, right? Um, I think the other thing with that too is you can provide some more flexible term length,
Yeah.
rental
Right.
length, right? Provide some additional flexibility. Because again, we're talking about items that you probably have multiple of in your rental store. They're probably not, you're probably never out completely. And really, again, under this subscription model, does it really make a difference if the guy has it 2 days versus 1 day versus 4 hours? I would argue no. I would say you can
Yeah.
provide that additional flexibility. He's not going to go drain snake his house and 3 neighbors at the same time, right?
Right. Right.
He might take an aerator and go do his 2 neighbors as well. But again, I don't look through that pessimist window. I look through the optimist window and I say, you know what? If he wants to go home and he paid for the subscription and he wants to provide that benefit and that time to his neighbors, hopefully they go, wow, this A1 Rent It, they're a pretty cool spot. And when it comes time for them to need to rent or want to rent, we're at top of mind. I think you're creating loyalty. I think you're creating branding through a subscription program.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's that's a bigger, longer view than most people think. They think, oh, I'm discounting my rental. It's like, no, what you're buying is the fact that they're never going to look at a competitor again, right? Like we did, wife and I last summer did the AMC Movie Pass subscription. You pay a monthly fee, you get like 3 movies per month, free popcorn, whatever. Like we went to the movies all the time. Guess what we didn't do is we didn't go look at the rates for all the different movie tiers. We kept going to that one because you pay for it and you're locked in, and there's a lot of value in that. So I'm interested to see how this evolves. I think there's something here, and I think rental companies are starting to think about it. I want to get to the last question here, so before we wrap up on time, I guess just final piece of advice for a rental company at one location, considering buying, going to a second, third, fourth location, really just starting to think about that process. What advice would you give for an independent one location group thinking about purchasing and expanding?
Yeah, I think if you're going to go the acquisition route, the first part is get out the map and geographically start looking at where you want to be and where your target market is, and start planning that out, and then overlay the rental stores and your potential acquisition targets around that, and then figure out who those people are and start introducing yourself. And it's as simple as saying, "Hey, my name's Chad. Um, I'm in the rental business. Have you ever thought about getting out of the rental business? Because I'm looking to grow." And just start that conversation. That's how my first acquisition went. I probably had 4 to 6 interactions with the seller, and over a 18 to 24 month period. And one day I showed up and there was an email in my inbox that says, "Are you still interested?" And then it went from there. So I think that idea that you're out there, you're prospecting, you're saying, "Hey, I'm interested." It's one of those things that I think most business owners don't think about until they're like ready to get out. Like they
Yeah.
wanted to be out last week or tomorrow, right? And whether that's a life circumstance change, or whether it's just they got tired, or whether it's whatever. But the idea is I think you look at that map geographically and you say, where do we want to be? Where do we believe our company is best positioned? Where do we want to operate in? What market and what customers are there? And then start looking at the overlay of existing rental stores that are there and start reaching out.
That's great advice. I think what I've heard for M&A transactions, the best ones, the relationships are like lines and not dots. So like, you know, that guy 4, 5, 6 times over a period of years, and then the transaction, not, hey, can I buy your business next week? You know, I've never met you before. Like, that's not the right approach. And you're talking about looking at a map. I appreciate you got a map of the U.S. right behind you. So you're looking at a map all the time. Well, Chad, thanks for coming on here. It's been great to get to know you at the different events I've seen you at over the last few years. I really appreciate what you're doing for the industry. I think your experience as someone who's the family-owned business since 1963, but you're also seeing the future and pushing the industry towards that future. I think it makes the entire industry better. So thanks again, Chad, for coming on. Thanks for everything you do for the industry.
Yeah, appreciate you as well, Kyle. Always a great conversation. And so thanks for the invite today. And I hope we get to chat again soon.